time, but it was something you could put down, and then you knew that you could play drums on top of it. I mean, I very rarely used a snare drum and a bass drum, for example. I used all the tom-toms and the bongos and the congas sounds they had, shakers, things that would be really almost like a percussionist to my drumming. But that's probably one of the reasons why I said no to the CR-78, because at that point I hadn't really started writing, and I was with a group called Brand X, which were dealing in really diverse time signatures, which drum machines at that point weren't really capable of. So I didn't see much point of a drum machine. And most of them were still stuck in the age of they weren't hip at all. Unless, you got lucky with the CR-78, which is obviously In the Air Tonight is one of the most sort of sampled songs around, probably, for using that sound and using that song, bits of that song. So obviously there was some hip stuff in there, if you managed to find it, but I was never threatened. I welcomed it. And certainly by the time I started writing, which was very soon after I got the CR-78, it was a blessing. I probably still don't know how to use it properly. I mean, it was one of those things where you watched it had a series of LEDs that kind of went up and then up and then up and down the top of the machine, and it would be brighter where you'd programmed a drum. So, and if you clicked on it again, it would disappear. So they weren't midded. I did get one midded at some point later in life, but they weren't midded, which means that they couldn't read time code, and they couldn't really hitch up to anything. You just started it, and that's why most 808 tracks, most 808 songs that were built on the 808 have about 4 bars of drum machine before the music comes in. It's because that was the only way you could start it. You'd start it, and then you'd wait for 4 bars, and then you'd come in. But I'm still not probably completely sure, 100% sure, being a drummer, how the computer side of it worked. I just used it as a rhythm machine, really, and to come up with some interesting moods. The way I use, you try to get a drummer to play something simple for 10, 15 minutes, he won't do it. We get bored. We'll play. No, don't do that. Just play. And drummers, they kind of get bored, and they want to show that they can do more than that, so they do that. Whereas drum machine will just, as long as you turn it on and you turn it off, it will just play that forever. And so that was the beauty of it. The joke is that you can't pour beer over a drum machine because it will stop working, but you can pour beer over a drummer, and he'll just keep going. But that was the beauty of it. It gave you a relentless, and if you used certain sounds, it would give you a hypnotic kind of feel. And that, for something like In the Air Tonight, or even One More Night, which was just a steady groove, it was kind of invaluable because it didn't have any of the frills that drummers would put in. It will suggest what can come afterwards. That's the thing. Obviously there were lots of things on the CR-78 which they did put on they finessed and reproduced and took it a little bit of a stage further with the 808, which made it much more usable. But to me, the way I write is I need an atmosphere, whether it's a sound on a keyboard or obviously I write on the piano, which is a straight ahead sound, but atmospheres will tell you where to go next and suggest what you could do after this chord, and sometimes those 808s, patterns that you write would give you a great platform and something that not a lot has to happen, which is why on my stuff certainly there's a lot of space when there's a drum machine. It's good. It became a kind of a hip hop thing, and obviously the guys today are still using some of the elements. There was certain things like the bass drum was incredibly deep, and had a kind of decay which the hip hop guys, the dance producers like, and the sort of snappy snare drum was. They've all got their character. Roland went on to do the 707, which didn't really appeal to me. It was much more of a straight ahead drum machine. The 909, which I used on things like Take Me Home, but Roland was great at making machines that had individual and original sounds. So it was very useful to have that as a kind of a colour background, if you like, to write on. Well, I don't think of it as a cold sound. I mean, I think the general consensus of opinion is that drum machines are automatic and rigid and relentless. I use the word relentless, but I meant that in a way that you probably put better as not stopping. But you know, these things are as good or as bad as the people that, as they are as the tools in the hand of the people that use them. If you're a good drummer, then you kind of program it in a way that you know it will do the job that you want. I think it's very easy to just to get nothing out of it. You know, I mean, to have it do its job, but to not have anything close to being called a groove. You know, I mean, a groove is by definition almost kind of a warm and, you know, great feel, and people would say that's a contradiction with drum machines, but to me it isn't. You know, it depends on what you program or what by luck you get out of it. So, and Sexual Healing is a fantastic example of that. And Marvin Gaye was a great drummer. I mean, he played some of the early Motown songs. You know, he knew what he was talking about as well as being a great singer and writer. But you know, that's a great example of someone that knew what they were talking about, getting out of that machine what they wanted. You know, in the hands of somebody else, it could easily be a cold. I mean, I think the sounds I found very, very kind of stimulating, particularly the conga sounds and the bongo sounds and the kind of sounds. You know, the kind of you could do a lot with them. You could make them quite mellow, you know, with the desk and things. And you put a little bit of reverb on, and they would go back, and it could, you know, be a panorama to whatever you were writing. Being a drummer that writes, it's kind of tricky because, you know, you either sit there, and if you do everything yourself, I tried to record drums in my early days of writing. You know, I'd be playing, and I had the mics over the drums, but I'd be playing, and over there was the desk, and I'd be trying to make sure that the needle moved, but not too much. And you know, then I'd kind of be. This didn't last very long, I have to say, but I'd be sort of singing what I was writing, singing along to the drumming, and then having to put then after I got the drum track down, I would then go and record the music side of it, you know, the piano. And it just became impossible, really. You lose your place. Did I do that once or twice? Have I done the verse yet? You know, it just became impossible. So I use drum machines as a tool, you know. I mean, and for me, it opened up my world for writing. So I never had anything other than a friendly relationship with it. It was never a threat. It was, you know, it was always a kind of turn it on and just play around, you know, and see what went with it, what went with the thing that I had programmed. But now that one, that's a bit busy. Take that beat out, you know. And then sort of sit there for 10 minutes, and the thing just carried on quite happily. So I found it always a welcoming instrument. You know, I never viewed it as a problematic kind of cold tool. I mean, on that album, the No Jacket Required album, apart from Take Me Home, which is 909, so obviously that had come out by that point. There was On Long Long Way to Go, which is a song I did with Sting on that album. That's an 808. There was 808 initially on everything, because that would have been my only, along with 909, that would have been my main source of accompaniment to write. There were probably some tracks that we kind of got rid of the 808 completely. So Studio was done by David Frank, so he brought his own machines in. He produced that himself. I mean, it was with him, but I mean, he kind of came in with the program stuff. So I'm not sure what was used on that. But and through to the next album, but seriously, you know, which had Another Day in Paradise, which is 808 all the way. Father to Son. I mean, I'm just trying to think of tracks off the top of my head because I haven't looked at the sleeve for a long, long time. But it was. Oh, Do You Remember? That was a big hit. That had kind of a great groove actually, and that was just 808. Overdubbed a couple of cymbal rolls, but it was, you know, it was just an exception actually to the rule. In terms of what we're talking about, whether drum machines have grooves or not. I mean, that was I remember sitting in an office with Amit Ertegun from Atlantic, you know, and just saying, wow, you know. I mean, I don't even know if he realised it was a drum machine, but you know, it wasn't drum machine craft work. It was a beautiful thing. We used in Genesis, I mean, we've been talking about my career really, but I mean, with Genesis, we've used the 808 since Abacab. I think Abacab was probably the first album that we used them on the album anyway. I mean, we probably used them as writing tools, but as being the drummer, I would probably, I mean, it's a given that sometimes drum machine is used and that will be replaced, and sometimes it's depending on the part, you would come in and you'd use some of the elements of the 808. One of the drawbacks was that it was not midied, so you couldn't, once you got it on tape, you were kind of stuck with it. You couldn't put it back, you couldn't lay it onto tape again, but taking out this instrument, taking out that instrument, because it had no time code unless you modified it. So, but I kind of always worked around that. And so Genesis, I mean, Man on the Corner from Abacab was one of my songs, so we used that quite heavily on that track. And even more recently with the We Can't Dance album, which was made like 15 years after the drum machines kind of era, because there was another drum machine called the SP12, which was an emulator made instrument, and that was a sampling drum machine. So we just sampled all the 808 sounds, and so things like fading. A lot of that album of the Genesis We Can't Dance also had the 808 on it, sound-wise, but of course they were sampled onto another machine because they were more flexible to use that way. I mean, I've just recently tried to buy an 808 because I've got a little studio here in New York, and I tried to get one because drum machines nowadays are so complicated, and I have got no time for that. I mean, I've been a drummer, I've never been good with manuals. I just want to be able to use it and sort it out for myself. And an 808, just give me an 808 because that I know how to use, and it's like, I want it, I don't want it, as opposed to, page 4 on, if you press that button 3 times, it goes to page 3. I'm not interested. And the 808s were incredibly expensive, those that were still around. And we thought, is it really worth it? I mean, it probably is worth it because they're unique. But, I've got something else that I use. I don't even go near it because it's so complicated. The SP1200, because it was a sampling machine, meant that you could kind of record anything, and then obviously just trigger something, trigger the 1200 with some other sound. And when I first had a demo of the 1200, it actually had some of my sounds on it, which I wasn't offended by. The guy suddenly got them, he's going to sue us. And I said, no, it's very flattering. But there were some studio sounds, and there were some sounds from the No Jacket Required album. There's some Don't Lose My Number, TomTom sounds, and snare and bass drum. And actually, on that album, the No Jacket Required album, there was a lot of drum machines, as I've said. So I thought it was kind of interesting that they sampled my drums onto this drum machine, but in fact the drums that they thought they were sampling was actually a drum machine in the first place. So it was just still going round and round, but I never learned. You can make a guitar sound so different, but there's no, you buy a Gibson SG and it sounds, I mean, a guitarist will say that sounds like a Gibson SG no matter what you do, but to a layman, and I consider myself a layman when it comes to guitars, you can put it through this, put it through that, and it doesn't sound like that anymore. Whereas you can't. It's very hard to mask the sound of an 808, and it's totally original, and it's unique. And to me, it kind of typifies or personifies an era. I mean, I was just thinking that even though I stopped using it after my initial love affair with it, you move on to find some other way of using it, but it still stays one of your tools in the armory, but I used it throughout both sides, and that was 1993. Can't turn back. There's all tracks all over that record that you got the 808 sound on. Again, by that point my 808 was getting a bit tight, so it was a mixture of 808 and the SP12 sampling the 808. But the actual 808 sounds have been with me all through my career, and even on the last record, in 2001. I didn't use it on Going Back to Motown, so you wouldn't have got a drum machine anywhere near that. But yeah, I've used it throughout my entire career. if not as an actual standalone 808 sounds, because they were unlike any other. I was looking for, I've got Giga Studios, which in themselves are antiques, but I've got a couple of Giga Studios in my studio, so I found myself looking for an 808 sound the other day, you know, and this is, it's like I'm looking for something that's basically quite simple, but I'm going through all this massive technology and, you know, banks of samples just to find something that sounds like an 808. So it sounds like I should have bought that 808, no matter how expensive it is. But I think, you know, I mean, I don't want to over-glorify the thing unnecessarily. I just think it was a fantastic drum machine, which it would be great if they still made. And you know, because they stopped making them, one had to start to sample them. They didn't last forever. I mean, I've got a couple, one of which is midded and had a much more sensitive tempo clock put on it. I've got them in my little studio in Switzerland. You know, and I would love to dust it off and see if it still works. But you know, I think the actual machine probably has some kind of magic because all the sounds work with each other. You know, if you just take some sounds and sample them, well, you can make something else out of it. You know, it doesn't destroy it. It just sometimes you just sort of have, you know, the internal circuitry. I'm sure, you know, if you have too much of this, it makes a difference to this. If you have too much of that, it makes a difference to this. So using it all in one machine has to have something special. I owe a lot, I suppose, to the fact that these drum machines existed, and it was those drum machines that we're talking about that I lent towards. Instead of, let's say, the Lin, you know, I mean, you know, which was very popular because it sounded like a drummer. Well, that's not what I wanted because I was a drummer. What I wanted was something else that you could use that would inspire you to write some music that kind of had a bit of space and was a little bit more out of the box than just having something that was like a Lin. So for me, most of my the tracks, a lot of the tracks people think of when they think of me, and I would say three in particular stand out: In the Air Tonight and One More Night and Another Day in Paradise. You know, owe a lot to Roland and a lot to the 808.
Welcome to a really special location this evening, St James's Church in Piccadilly, for a really special event. We are in the presence tonight of one of the UK's most successful artists. If I talk about, I'm talking an Oscar.
My posse's on Broadway. My posse's on Broadway. Me and Kid Sensation at home, away from home, in the black Benz limo with the say you love phone. I'm calling up the posse. It's time to get to ripping. I freaking eat sunroof to keep you suckers tripping. Everybody's looking. If you're jealous, turn around. The AMG kick keeps us closer to the ground. We're getting good grip from the 50 series tires. The Alpine's bumping, but I need the volume higher. Cause the 808 kick drum makes the girlies get dumb. We're rolling Rainier, and the jealous wanna get some. Every time we do this, sucker MCs wanna battle. I'm the man they love to hate, the J.R. Ewing of Seattle. Picked up the posse on 23rd and Jackson, heading for the strip. Yes, we're looking for some action. The limo's kinda crowded, the whole car was leaning back. Maharaji's watching TV with two girlies on his lap. On Martin Luther King, the set looks kinda dead. We need a new street, so posse move ahead. We all look kinda suave. The crew you can't forget, the Mix-a-Lot posse cola ripping up the set. My posse's on Broadway. My posse's on Broadway. Yep. My posse's on Broadway. My posse's on Broadway. Rolling and my posse was getting kinda bored. There's not another posse with more points scored. We don't walk around like criminals or flex like big gorillas. My homeboy Kid Sensation is the teenage lady killer. Maharaji's on the left side dancing like a freak. The girlies see his booty and the knees get weak. Larry is the white guy, people think he's funny. A real estate investor who makes a lot of money. Clacking lots of dollars, we all got gold. Cruising in his Benz and ain't got no place to go. Well, in 23rd, we saw nothing but thugs. The girlies was too skinny for smoking all them drugs. But the rock man got them and their butts just dropped. The freaks look depressed because our Benz won't stop. At 23rd and Union, the driver broke left. Kevin shouted Broadway, it's time to get deaf. My girl blew me a kiss, she said I was the best. She's looking mighty Vicky in a black silk dress. The closer that we get, the crazier I feel. My posse's on Broadway, it's time to get ill. My posse's on Broadway. Cruising Broadway and my wheels spinning slow. Rolling with your posse is the only way to go. The girlies by the college was looking for a ride. We tried to pick them up, but we had no room inside. We put them on the trunk, we put them on the hood. Some sat up with the driver, they made it feel good. The posse's getting bigger, there's much too many freaks. My muffler's dragging, my suspension's getting weak. Now the freaks are getting hungry and Mix-a-Lot streaking. We stopped at Taco Bell for some Mexican eating, but Taco Bell was closed. The girls was on my tip. They said, go back the other way, we'll stop and eat a dip. This is the place where the cool hang out. The swaths like to play and the rich flaunt clout. Posse to the burger stand so big we walk in twos. We're getting dirty looks from those other sucker crews. Kid Sensation dropped the 20 and didn't even miss it. Skeezer from another crew, she picked it up and kissed it. Her boyfriend's illin', he went to slap her face. My homeboy PLB co-spray the boy with mace, cause I never like to bump. Who beat up on his girl? If you don't have game, then let her leave your world. We took this girl with us, with him she rode the bus. She gave the boy the finger and the sucker starts to cuss. Boy, I got a deaf posse, you got a bunch of dudes. You're broke, cold, crying about the rock man blues. You beat up on your girl, and now you're all upset. She's with the Mix-a-Lot posse on the Broadway set.
Yeah, that's Sir Mix-a-Lot with my posse's on Broadway on KNES. Hello, KNES.
Hi, I'd like to hear the new song Posse on Broadway by Sir Mix-a-Lot.
All right, I'll play it again. Yeah. Real music. You have to take a picture.
My posse's on Broadway. on Broadway. Me and Kid Sensation at home away from home in the black Benz limo with a cellular phone. I'm calling up the posse, it's time to get to ripping. I'm freaking each sunroof to keep you suckers tripping. Everybody looking, if you're jealous, turn around. The AMG keeps us closer to the ground. We're getting good grip from the 50 series tires. The Alpine's bumping, but I need the volume higher. Cause the 808 kicks from makes a curly stick. Then we're rolling Rainier, and the jealous wanna get some. Every time we meet, the sucker MCs wanna battle. And the man they love to hit the JRU in Seattle. Hit up the posse on 23rd and Jackson, heading for the strip. Yes, we're looking for some action. The limo's kinda crowded, the whole car was leaning back. Maharaji's watching TV with two girlies on his lap. On Martin Luther King, the set looks kinda dead. We need a new street, so posse move ahead, and we all look kinda suave. The crew you can't forget, the mix-a-lot posse cola ripping up the set. My posse's on Broadway. My posse's on Broadway. Posse up. My posse's on Broadway. My posse's on Broadway. Rolling in my posse was getting kinda bored. There's not another posse with more points scored. We don't walk around like criminals or flex like big gorillas. My homeboy Kid Sensation is the teenage lady killer. Maharaji's on the deaf side, dancing like a freak. The girlies see his booty and their knees get weak. Larry is the white guy, people think he's funny. A real estate investor who makes a lot of money. Flashing lots of dollars, we all got gold. Cruising in his Benz and ain't got no place to go. Wailing 23rd, we saw nothing but thugs. The girlies were too skinny for smoking all them drugs. But the rock man got them and their butts just dropped. The freaks look depressed because our Benz won't stop. At 23rd and Union, the driver broke a left. Kevin shouted, Broadway, it's time to get deaf. My girl blew me a kiss. She said I was the best. She's looking mighty pretty in a black silk dress. The closer that we get, the crazier I feel. My posse's on Broadway, it's time to get ill. My posse's on Broadway. Cruising Broadway and my wheels spin slow. Rolling with your posse is the only way to go. The girlies by the college was looking for a ride. We tried to pick them up, but we had no room inside. We put them on the we put them on the hood. Some sat up with the driver, they made it feel good. The posse's getting bigger, there's much too many freaks. My muffler's dragging, my suspension's getting weak. Now the freaks are getting hungry and mix a lot streaking. We stopped at Taco Bell for some Mexican eating, but Taco Bell was closed. The girl was on my tip. They said, go back the other way, what's happening to this? This is the place where the cool hang out. The swaps like to play and the rich want cup. Posse to the breakers and so big we walk in twos. We're getting dirty looks from those other sucker crews. Kid Sensation dropping 20 and didn't even miss a teaser from another crew. She picked it up and kissed it. A boyfriend's illin', he went to slap her face. My homeboy BLB, cold sprayed a boy with mace. Cause I never liked the bump. Who beat up on his girl? If you don't have game, then let her leave your world. We took his girl with us. With him she rode the bus. She gave the boy the finger and the sucker starts to cuss. Boy, I got a deaf posse. You got a bunch of dudes. You broke cold crying about the rock man blues. You beat up on your girl and now you're all upset with the mix-a-lot posse on the Broadway set.
Yeah, that's the Mix-a-Lot with my posse's on Broadway on KNES. Hello, KNES.
Hi, I'd like to hear the new song Posse on Broadway by Dr. Mix-a-Lot.
All right, I'll play it again. Yeah.
My posse's on Broadway. My posse's on Broadway.
Throw away those baggy clothes you wear to hide your body with this crazy loophole. According to a new scientific discovery, eating this vegetable and doing a